Welcome back. I'm Ryan from Blue Gaming, and today I'm going to be talking about Everspace. Now, before we get into this, there is an expansion that has come out recently as of the time of uploading this, but as of the time of recording this, that expansion has not come out yet, so I will only be talking about the base game in this video. So let's get right into it. If you don't happen to know what Everspace is, it is a roguelite 6 Degrees of Freedom space game where you can go from node to node, similar to how it was in FTL. And once you go to a node, you can fly around, fight enemies, go to different trading spots, mine for resources, or search derelict spaceships for resources, get new weapons, and get different just items to upgrade and repair your ship, and then you go on to the next node and continue on forward. And then once you get to the end of a sector, then you go on to the next sector and continue like normal. And personally, I don't really like these kinds of games all that often. It's just something about the roguelike games that I don't really like. For me, they personally have to have a really good progression system behind them for me to actually get invested to play through it. And so I'll start about the stuff that you go in before you actually go into a run. So starting out, there's 3 things that you get to go over before you start a run. The first one is what ship you're going to be choosing. In the base game, there are 3 different ships, each having a different amount of health and maneuverability and whatnot. Then you get to choose a setup, which is kind of like your starting gear and whatnot. I've currently played through quite a bit of this, but I haven't unlocked a second ship just because it takes a lot, and I spend my money on perks, which I'll talk about here in a second. But from what I've heard, each ship has 3 different loadouts or starting setups that you can choose from, and each of those different setups really change how the ship operates, whether it's going to be more defensive or more aggressive or a balance of the two. And the game already starts to stumble here because the first setup that you're given for the first ship, which is the Colonial Interceptor, which is what you're seeing me play, in the footage that you're seeing, I'm using the second setup. The first setup gives you a basic laser gun and a Gatling gun, and just like some light missiles and stuff, and that is the most boring setup in this entire game. There's nothing interesting about what they give you, and really I think that they should have tweaked the first setup because it is the weakest thing that I've seen in this game. Although thankfully it isn't really that difficult to get the second setup for the Colonial Interceptor. So after you choose your setup, then you get to go on and choose perks. Or rather, I should say level up perks. As you go through different runs, you will get money. Every time you finish off a run, you will be given a set amount of money, depending on what you did and how much money you actually got in the run. You have to use all that money before you start the next run, and you can use this on perks to either upgrade the ship that you're using, or upgrade yourself as a pilot. Now, with the ship upgrades, if you go and move on to a different ship, you don't carry those upgrades over, but if you upgrade the pilot, then you get to carry those on over throughout whatever ship you want to use. And it does start out really fine with how much things cost, but they quickly start to skyrocket, and if you want to level up something to really high level, then it's going to take several runs just to upgrade that thing, because the amount of money that it takes just goes through the roof compared to what you actually get. And so you really have to kind of disperse your points or your money around the place, because you're not going to be able to upgrade one thing up really high really quickly. So once you've finished all that, you can start your run, and the first thing that you will immediately notice is how beautiful this game looks. What you're currently seeing is this game on the highest graphic settings that it can possibly go to, at a solid 60 FPS, and I'm not even using that high end of a computer, but I could definitely see where if you're running something on a little bit of the lower end, where you might want to turn down a bit of the graphic settings, because this thing can definitely put out some good views. But once you get past the visuals, things start to go downhill a little bit. Now, I'll leave my criticisms until a little bit later. Let's go over the things that I actually like. And I'll start with just the locations. Looking around at these places, there is a good amount of variety, surprisingly, in space. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of empty space in Everspace. You can go to places where it's just a huge asteroid field. There could be places where there's just chunks of ice floating around. You could go to some places where it is just almost nothing around the place. You could go to places where there's a huge mining colony. You could see and go to giant destroyed ships that might have stuff for you to scavenge in, and just the locations that you get to fly around are amazing. Another great thing is the actual cockpit that you get to see. You can fly the ship in third person, but I preferred first person just because it looks amazing on the inside. This is one of the best spaceship cockpits that I've ever seen, and with the way that the light kind of shines off the curved glass on this one, it is just amazing the way that it looks. Sadly though, it doesn't exactly give you all the information that you need on the cockpit, so you do kind of have to have some of the other things turned on. Some of the other UI elements, which I kind of wish we could turn those off and just have the cockpit give us all the information that we need. Moving on, another thing that I really like is the weapons in this game. They not only sound really good, which technically shouldn't even be possible because you can't have sound in space, and they really look good. The lasers that you see me using throughout this they just look amazing for lasers. They're exactly how I would want sci-fi space super lasers to look like. But I'll get away from the way of just how things look now. Going on to actual gameplay things that I like. The freedom that you are given in each of these areas is great. You will typically see that there are some yellow coated ships out there. Those are somewhat friendly. They're more of a neutral force. You can decide to fight them if you want to. You'll occasionally see those ships be escorting freighters that can carry different things, and you can destroy those freighters, and there's a great piracy aspect that you can really do. But that does bring a downside in all of those ships will then start to attack you, and they will alert their friends in other sectors near you, and they'll try to go attack you as well. You can also completely just run away from enemies, and sometimes that's even necessary. And one of the things that I really like doing is if I get too deep into a fight with some enemies, I will actually drag them over to some of the neutral fighters and have them start fighting each other, where I can just sit off on the side and not actually have to take damage during that fight. So that is pretty much the extent of what I actually like in this game. Let's move on to the myriad of negatives that I have about this game. Now, the first one, potentially the biggest one, and the one that you'll be seeing the most in this video, is actually how spread out everything is. Now, according to the map, things might only be 5 or so kilometers away from you, but that's a good 20, 30, 40 seconds of flight to actually get over there, and it just takes forever to get from one spot to another when going around these maps. And sadly, because of the way that things are placed just everywhere, you could go 5 kilometers over to one item and then look around and have to go another 5 kilometers to another item, and then look, and the final item might be another 5 to 6 kilometers away from that. And so it's just several minutes of just doing nothing and flying towards an object that you're doing in a spot. And I kind of wish everything was a little bit more close together, although I understand why it's not, because this is just the vastness of space. The way that you could kind of fix that is by making the ship a little bit faster to begin with. Now, you can upgrade the ship's speed, but there are far more important upgrades than actually making the ship faster. So that's kind of a thing that I wish that they would change. Now, the next one kind of springs off that last point. When looking for items, they didn't go with like a 3D map or anything like that to help you find things. No, their icons are in a circle around the edge of your screen, and you really have to just spin around in your ship trying to find them. And there's just been better ways to show where items are relative to you in space games than how this game does it. I'm personally thinking of how Elite Dangerous does it with their 3D map inside the cockpit of the ship, and I think that doing something like that would have helped a lot here, so that you don't get all dizzy and spun around in the emptiness of space, which is actually something that you can do pretty easily if you're not paying attention. Now, this next one and final thing is kind of a big deal for me, and it's kind of a staple of roguelike games, and that is, at some point while going through this game, you will just hit a wall. Whether that's finally coming up against an enemy that is so powerful that you can't possibly defeat him, or just running out of materials like gas or something like that, or nanobots which help repair your ship. Things like that just end a run prematurely, which I know that that's a staple of these roguelike games, but I've seen it done. I've seen roguelike games do it better. Thinking of Dead Cells. In Dead Cells, there is not something that really just stops a run dead in its tracks. It is usually player error that stops a run in Dead Cells. Granted, there are the super powerful bosses, but that is a well-defined wall that you have to get over. It's more of an obstacle than a just all-out wall, where in this game, nothing's really well-defined. A difficult enemy could come out of nowhere. The game could just screw you out of fuel to get to the next area, and there's nothing that you can really do about it. It's not up to you on whether or not something spawns or something doesn't spawn, and I really, really hate that in these kinds of games. And actually, at the end of this video, you will see that that's exactly what happens to the run that you're watching right now. I go to just some normal area, and then out of nowhere, an elite fighter warps into the area after I'm almost finished with it, and just completely wrecks me and all of the neutral fighters in the area, and there's nothing that I can do about it. I can't even run away from this guy like I can with normal troops. So that is something that I really, really don't like about roguelike games in general, but it does have to do with this game in particular. So now let's go into the big question of whether or not you should buy this game, wait for a sale, wait for a deep sale, or never buy this game. Now, there are one big stipulation that will give this game two different scores. This game has full VR support in both Oculus Rift and Vive. If you want to play this game in VR, this game is a definite buy if this is something that you would like. playing this game in VR would probably be amazing. I can't exactly test it myself, I don't have a VR headset, but from playing this game, if you had VR capabilities, this game would be a lot better than if you didn't. Now, if you don't have VR capabilities, if you don't have a Vive or an Oculus Rift, well then, I think that this game is actually wait for a deep sale. And I say that because behind the scenes, there's not really much going on with this game. And the core gameplay loop of actually going through and playing this game run after run after run can actually get kind of tedious and boring. And so for that, unless you're really big into roguelike games, even then I would say wait for a sale, because at the regular price of $30, this game is just a little bit too far out there. I think something down in the range of 15 or so would be a better price for this game. So that's going to be it for this. Remember, I'm Ryan from Blue Water Gaming, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.